Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Sarah Carlson here at Fulcrum Financial Group and Katie Toth, Associate Wealth Advisor. We have a special guest today, Melissa Luck of KXLY. She is the news director and has been an active part of our community for over 18 years. Melissa has incredible knowledge and experience of getting timely and important information out to our community. And we are so inspired by her work she's doing about the Spokane squeeze and how so many people are being impacted by this pandemic and economic challenges that we've been facing. So I wanted to ask you, what have you seen as the biggest ways our community has been impacted by this past year with the pandemic?
Well, it's so crazy to think it's been a year. We always joke there's a visitor log in the front office here at KXLY because most of our building's been completely shut down. And the last visitor to our building was March 10th. So that's just wild to me to think like, oh my gosh, now we're coming up on that. So, when you look back, I think there's so many ways that people have been affected, whether it's health-wise or losing a loved one to the pandemic or job loss. I think to me, when I think about it, I think just that sense of security has been the biggest impact to people overall of, how quickly we realized the things that we all take for granted could just literally go away in one day. The things that we complain about, like being busy and like running around all the time to our kids' games and practices and all those things, one day you would miss that. So I think the sense of security has been the biggest thing. What we've focused on at KXLY, we've focused on the health aspects, obviously, and now that's shifting to the vaccine. But I think when you talk about the people who were already disproportionately affected in our community by healthcare inequity and economic inequity, being hit the hardest, I think has been, it's exaggerated the things that were already there. Access to food, what happened when the kids were out of school, and then, families lost, at least 5 guaranteed meals a week for their kids. But I do think it's that loss of security and that feeling that I think we're all going to have for a long time, that the ground could like literally move out from underneath us at any point. I think it's going to change our perspective for a long time.
We're not going to be returning to normal. We're going to come out of this in ways that I think make us have to acknowledge our vulnerability, but then hopefully also in ways that make us stronger. I'm curious, what services and resources have you seen be most helpful to our community in all of those areas that you had touched on?
I think we realized that a lot of the places that we already knew about that were already doing good work in the community were going to be needed more than ever. We did a series early on called Finding the Helpers. We totally ripped off Mr. Rogers, but like in a respectful way, because I'm obsessed with Mr. Rogers.
He would support it.
He would. I have some encouragements on my desk, Mr. Rogers so on them. Cute. So like I have a Mr. Rogers thing. So we did the, wanted to focus a series called Finding the Helpers. And we started it right away because we knew that it couldn't just all be terrible news. I mean, it was terrible news. A lot of awful things were happening, but we wanted to empower some people. So, those helpers we found in the community were the people, a lot of them who we leaned on a lot. I mean, you think about, we did a story yesterday about the diaper bank with Spokane Valley Partners. We've done stories with Second Harvest and the increased demand there. Stories with, just aspects of the regional health district that people didn't know existed, as far as what's available to people. But I think it was a lot of those, the big partners in our community that already carry this load really stepped up. And then it was the small resources that we found, early on. You guys probably remember, it seems like a lifetime ago, but every story about, every random person making masks for people. Well, Regal Fabrics up on the South Hill was like, I'm just going to make all these masks for first responders. We didn't even, it was a place you pass all the time and didn't know existed. And here they were making this huge impact in our community. So I think, the people who have a responsibility, and that's their mission anyway, really stepped up. I think about the food fighters that sprung up with, and I'm going to get it all wrong who was all involved, but, Marcus Riccelli was involved, No Lie was involved. And you'd see these call outs to say, hey, we're going to go deliver a bunch of meals. Who can volunteer? And it was, it was a big impact as far as meals in our community, but it also gave the individual something to do to feel helpful. Because I think we all felt really helpless. Like, what am I going to do? So I think there were so many of those big resources, but I think the small resources that may not even exist after this. Think about that Spokane quarantine that was, ordering food from restaurants and then delivering it to people. So then you're supporting the restaurants and you're giving people meals. I think people always say this about Spokane, but that when things are bad, Spokane steps up, and holy cow, like Spokane stepped up. And I think that that's something that will really stick with people after all this is over.
Right.
And it was necessary at the time because it was isolating. I mean, I have a lot of reporters who work here who are from somewhere else, and they're not here with their families, and they're not, their friends are the people they work with. And so I could see it in real time with them of just the isolation. So just finding those ways to connect people, whether it was digitally or whether it was on TV or sometimes just hearing other people's stories. We've been doing a series called Her Recession since October, focusing on how women have been impacted. And we put out a call to say, let us know how you've been impacted. Immediately, women told us like really personal stories about how they're impacted by this. And I think people just need to feel like they're seen and that they're not the only ones. And I think even, food and employment and all those things are crucial. I mean, those are things that we need in our lives. But boy, that connection and just knowing that you're not the only one, I think that's really impactful for our overall well-being too.
What kind of opportunities exist for people to get involved with, like, where do you see, like, now a year in, what are areas that people can reach out and make a difference that you see?
I think it's going to be a lot of like just reminding people when it's over, like, like you said, Katie, there's no normal to go back to. We're moving on to something new. But I think realizing that as things kind of get a little bit more open and kids are back in school and those types of things, to not forget about those resources and not forget about those organizations. So I'm involved with Project Beauty Share, that gives hygiene products and makeup to women and in shelters and those types of things. Well, there was a huge boost in donations. People were cleaning out their closets and thinking, this is something I can do to help. But how do you keep supporting those organizations after it's over? I think about Second Harvest Food Bank, they put out the call, we need food. People in our community need food. We'd go out, the Women and Children's Free Restaurant, it's just down the street from KXLY, and I would drive by coming to work and there'd be lines around the block. I mean, it was just things you wouldn't think of happening here. And people stepped up to help them then. Well, how are you going to help those people 6 months from now? How are you going to help those organizations a year from now? Because people might go back to work, but the repercussions, the economic repercussions for a lot of people are not going to go back to normal right away. So I think just remembering those things and trying to think back to that spirit that we had in October, March, April of, how can I help my community? How can you always help your community so that, that those impacts are long lasting?
I love that point of, now that kind of we've seen each other in this new way, how do we keep seeing each other and keep showing up in ways that are going to matter, and especially matter as the different economic implications of this continue to impact so many households. So I love all the points that you've spoken to. I really appreciate it.
Well, we talk about with our Her Recession coverage of, the impacts. Women left the workforce. I mean, a lot of women didn't have a choice. It was like, your kids are going to be home from school. Someone's got to be there with them, right? And most likely it's going to be women that leave their jobs or change their hours to do that. Well, it's going to take them a long time to catch up. I mean, these are generational impacts in some ways. We all, we know that I think we're all fortunate, but for a woman to just step back in and people are like, what's this gap of a year? At least COVID is an easy explanation for it, right? But those impacts are going to be in our community for a really, really long time and affect a lot of families. So our goal is to just kind of keep that message out there that while most people are, heading back to work and the kids are back in school, for a lot of people, this is far from over for them.
Right. It really is, the emotional impact, the physical impact. And I think we all have an opportunity in our own way to reach out to those, whether it be neighbors or coworkers. And I think by talking about it, it's important not to pretend like this is like, oh, we'll soldier through it. Okay. Keep moving on. No, it's like, there's let's not miss out on the beauty of a recovery. Not only economically, but socially, we have an amazing community Melissa, you are such a bright spot in our community. We just so admire the work you do, and for you to take time out to share with us your ideas on this is really so nice. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to do it and I appreciate it. And I realize that I rambled, but I get excited about talking about it. So, so thank you. And thanks for shining a light on these issues because it affects all of us, whether it affects us personally or not. So thank you so much.
How can our viewers follow you? How can they track the good work you're doing?
Well, watch KXOI always, morning, noon, and night. Just leave the TV on forever. That would be helpful. You know, I obviously, you know, watching us on the air because we are committed to doing this in a different way. We're committed to telling impactful stories that really matter in people's lives. It takes longer, it's harder to do, but it's our mission. And we were already heading this way, and this has really reinforced that. So, you know, on our newscasts every day, but also a lot of people aren't home to watch the news at 5 o'clock. I understand. So our website has a ton of resources. Our specific HER recession coverage is at kxoi.com/HER recession. And share stories, but more than that, share your resources. People watching might have some resources for women in our community. We'd love to hear those. We want to help people as much as tell their stories. So yeah, so our website, I wouldn't recommend following me on Twitter. It's a lot about college basketball right now. But you know, if you want to, please do. But yeah, just you know, supporting local journalism wherever you're getting your journalism from, whether it's our TV station, the newspaper, other stations. As we've all seen in the last year, local journalism is really, really crucial in understanding how our community works. And so whether it's us or another agency, just support local journalism.
It's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We know that our viewers have really appreciated this time with you, and this has meant a lot to us. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm happy to do it.